Imagine this. You're stepping into the heart of Rome. It's the Campo Fiori, a bustling square. But on this morning, a brutally cold morning in February 1600, the air is just heavy.
It's not the usual noise of the market. There's this tension. And right there, in the center of the square where you normally see flowers and vegetables, there's a pyre.
And on it, naked and completely silenced, is a man. A former Dominican friar, a celebrated philosopher, an intellectual celebrity who had crisscrossed all of Europe. Giordano Bruno.
And when you say silenced, do you mean that literally? They use this vice made of wood to clamp his tongue, to imprison his, quote, wicked words, and then they burn him alive.
It's a horrifying image, just an absolute flashpoint in Western history. This man, born Filippo Bruno in Nola back in 1548, he was this incredible intellectual chameleon.
He really was. I mean, a poet, an alchemist, a cosmological theorist, an esotericist. He was just this force of nature who took the Copernican view of the cosmos and, well, he expanded it into something utterly terrifying for the powers that be.
So for this deep dive, our sources are pretty comprehensive. They detail his chaotic, fugitive life, these radical theories that didn't just support Copernicus, but just blew the whole idea of a finite universe to pieces. And then, of course, his agonizing 7-year trial and his almost mythical legacy.
And our mission today is to get past the headlines, to really unpack the true reasons for his condemnation. Was it, just about his astronomical views?
It looks at something deeper. A profound theological heresy that was all tangled up with a dangerous, politically destabilizing philosophy. We need to look at the charges, the man, the whole climate that led to that fire.
That's the core question, isn't it? The scientific martyr versus the philosophical heretic. Because how we answer that really defines how we remember him.
Exactly. He was absolutely fighting for other worlds in a moving earth, but those ideas might have just been the surface layer of a much deeper conflict he seemed to ignite everywhere he went. Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the man himself, his 2 decades of volatile wandering. Bruno's life reads less like a career and more like an intellectual fugitive's passport.
He's born into a military family in Nola, near Naples, shows immense promise early on. So at 17, he enters the Dominican order at San Domenico Maggiore, takes the name Giordano.
Which is a huge step. I mean, the Dominicans were one of the most intellectually rigorous, but also one of the most dogmatically strict orders in the church.
Absolutely. And he's ordained a priest by 1572. But it's during his time as a novice that he really masters the art of memory.
And this wasn't just, remembering grocery lists. In the Renaissance, these mnemonic techniques were a key to power, weren't they?
100%. Bruno's mastery of memory wasn't a party trick. It was a philosophical statement. He was using these incredibly advanced spatial and symbolic techniques, the loci method, to organize all of human knowledge into a single coherent system. He even wrote a book about it, On the Shadows of Ideas.
Yeah, and he was so good that he traveled to Rome to demonstrate his system for Pope Pius V. That tells you he's not some minor thinker. He's operating at the highest levels right from the start.
Exactly. His memory system was his calling card. But it was so complex, so effective, that it always skirted this line between high philosophy and,
well, magic.
A very dangerous place to be in the late 16th century.
The most dangerous. It brought him fame, but it also made him immediately suspicious.
And that suspicion turned into real conflict very, very quickly. Our sources say his taste for free thinking and forbidden books caused problems almost immediately.
It's amazing he lasted 11 years as a Dominican, honestly. The proceedings against him started early. At first, it was minor stuff. He was cited for taking down images of saints, keeping only a crucifix.
But it escalated. It escalated fast. He was reported for actively defending the Arian heresy,
which denied the divinity of Christ. That's not a theological debate. That's a direct attack on the foundations of the church.
It's a core tenet. And then came the smoking gun, so to speak. The thing that sealed his initial flight from Naples.
The book in the latrine.
Yes. They found a copy of the banned writings of Erasmus, a hugely suspect figure for the Inquisition. And not only did Bruno own it, he had annotated it. And he'd hidden it in the monastery latrine.
That's not just accidental ownership. That's calculated defiance.
It's actively studying forbidden material right under their noses. So, facing an indictment, he flees Naples in 1576, sheds his Dominican habit, and his life as an intellectual outlaw begins.
So what does a brilliant but now defrocked and indicted intellectual do? He starts this chaotic journey across Europe. Noli, Savona, Turin, Venice, eventually landing in Geneva in 1579, a Calvinist stronghold.
You'd think he'd be looking for safety, but he just carries his trouble with him. He's relentless, but he's also just stubbornly nonconformist.
Even in Geneva.
Especially in Geneva. Patrons there give him new clothes, but he tells the Marchese de Vico flat out, "I'm not here to adopt your religion. I'm just here to live at liberty." He wasn't looking for a new faith. He was looking for intellectual freedom.
So, predictably, he ends up getting arrested.
Of course. He and his printer, after publishing this really aggressive attack on a distinguished professor, they make him retract his statements before they let him leave. He just couldn't pledge allegiance to any system.
That inability to settle is the key to his whole life, isn't it? He bounces to Toulouse, then Paris. He even gets a doctorate in theology in Toulouse, maybe trying to get some legitimacy back.
But when he tries to make peace with the Catholic Church, a Jesuit priest denies him absolution. He is, for all intents and purposes, ideologically homeless.
But his memory skills were still his greatest asset. And in Paris, they catch the ear of King Henry III.
Yes, the king is fascinated. He summons Bruno to court because he wants to know if this incredible memory is, quote, natural or acquired by magic art.
The fear of magic was everywhere.
It was. And Bruno's ability to recall and organize vast amounts of information must have seemed supernatural. But Bruno, who could be very savvy when he wanted to be, attributed it not to sorcery, but to organized knowledge.
A brilliant deflection. He's using his own philosophical system to sidestep the charge of being an occultist.
For a time, it worked. He was a master at attracting powerful patrons. This patronage is what leads him to his most intellectually fruitful period. 2 years in England, from 1583 to 1585.
Right, as a guest of the French ambassador.
Michel de Castelnau. He connects with huge figures like Philip Sidney. He dedicates 2 of his most important books to him.
And he immediately uses this platform to challenge the establishment. He goes to Oxford, an absolute stronghold of Aristotelian thought, and tries to get a position. How did that go?
About as well as you'd expect. He failed spectacularly, and the reaction from the old guard was just venomous.
We have a quote from George Abbot, right? The future Archbishop of Canterbury.
We do, and it's fantastic. Abbot just mocks Bruno for supporting the Copernican view that the earth did go round and the heavens did stand still. And then he says it was probably Bruno's own head which rather did run round.
That's classic academic smackdown. That shows his scientific views were already being linked to his persona as this arrogant agitator.
It absolutely does. And it's in England that he publishes the core of his vision, his 6 Italian dialogues.
Including the Ash Wednesday Supper and On the Infinite Universe and Worlds.
Exactly. And the tone of the Ash Wednesday Supper, which is basically his account of a disastrous dinner debate with the Oxford faculty, is just famously tactless. It offended a lot of people who might have otherwise supported him.
His ego was always getting in his way. Now, speaking of intrigue, there's this fascinating theory from historian John Bossy that while Bruno was at the French embassy, he might have been spying for the English.
This adds a whole other layer, doesn't it? Bossy suggested he was passing intelligence on Catholic conspirators to Sir Francis Walsingham, Queen Elizabeth's spymaster, possibly under the pseudonym Henry Faggot.
So he wasn't just a philosopher. He might have been a player in the high-stakes game of international espionage.
If it's true, it completely complicates the simple martyr story. It means he was very familiar with political risk and betrayal.
So after 2 years, the French ambassador is recalled. Bruno goes back to Paris, gets into another huge fight over his anti-Aristotelian theses, and has to flee again, this time to Germany.
And the pattern just repeats. He gets excommunicated by the Lutherans in Helmstedt in 1590. Just think about that. He's been indicted by the Dominicans, banned by the Calvinists, and now excommunicated by the Lutherans.
He literally could not conform to any dominant religious or philosophical establishment.
None. And it's in Germany that he leans even harder into the occult, writing books like On Magic. And for him, this wasn't separate from his cosmology. It was all integrated.
That's a point that often gets missed, isn't it? These weren't just hobbies.
No, they were foundational to the heresy charges. In his view, magic was the practical application of his cosmology. If God is the world's soul, then the art of memory, which he saw as a kind of magic, was a way to mentally grasp and manipulate the forces of the universe.
He's proposing a way to access divine power without the church as an intermediary.
Which is terrifying for an institution whose entire power structure is based on being that sole intermediary.
Yeah.
He is, step by step, synthesizing his own doom. And then in 1591, the fateful invitation arrives.
The letter from the Venetian patrician,
Mocenigo invites him back to Italy to teach him the art of memory. Bruno also knows the mathematics chair at the University of Padua is open. He thinks Venice, the most liberal state in Italy, will be safe.
A fatal miscalculation.
A tragic one. He applies for the Padua chair, which Galileo gets a year later, and accepts Mocenigo's invitation. He walks right back into the fire, completely underestimating the reach and the determination of the Roman Inquisition.
So Bruno's life was this whirlwind. But the reason his name still echoes isn't just the biography, it's the sheer uncompromising radicalism of his ideas about the cosmos, and more importantly, about God.
Right. Let's get into the ideas that didn't just challenge the church, they conceptually incinerated the entire known universe.
To really get it, we have to remember the status quo he was up against, the Ptolemaic model.
The geocentric view. It was all so neat, so harmonious, and so theologically safe. Earth at the center, immobile, everything revolves around us. And the stars are just fixed points on this big celestial sphere. God is outside the container, making it all turn.
Copernicus had already moved the center to the sun, which was a huge deal, but he was cautious. He kept the fixed sphere stars, he kept the perfect circular orbits, he changed the address, but he kept the building.
That's a great way to put it, and this is where Bruno just breaks the mold. He takes the Copernican model and extends it to infinity. Radically.
He proposed that the universe is one, infinite, immobile, and it has no center.
Exactly. Because if it's infinite, every single point is the center. The circumference is nowhere. He completely throws out the celestial sphere. He throws out the idea of God being outside of creation.
And he insists that those twinkling stars we see at night are actually distant suns, just like ours. And crucially, they must have their own planets.
Exoplanets. And that idea, that makes him totally unique. The astrophysicist Stephen Soter has said Bruno was the first person in history to clearly articulate that concept, that stars are other suns, each with its own potential planetary system.
Which completely dismantles the special privileged status of our solar system.
And he connects this to his idea of cosmic pluralism. If there are countless suns, there must be countless worlds.
And he argued that these worlds would contain animals and inhabitants.
And there's the shockwave.
Right there.
Because if the universe is infinite, and if other worlds have intelligent life, then the entire story of salvation, the incarnation, Christ's sacrifice, humanity's central role, it all becomes, well, provincial.
Geographically and theologically irrelevant. Why would God create infinite worlds just to save this one little planet?
Exactly. He was also moving towards modern physics. He argued against the idea of solid, crystalline spheres holding the planets in place.
He thought they moved on their own.
Under their own impetus, through a kind of pure air or ether that offered no resistance. He's stripping the heavens of their special, perfect status and viewing the entire cosmos as one unified system.
What's really amazing is how he dealt with the main physical objection to a moving Earth. You know, the tower argument. If the Earth is spinning so fast, why doesn't a dropped object fall behind?
He tackles this head-on in the Ash Wednesday Supper, and it's a genuine aha moment in the history of science. He basically anticipates Galileo's principle of relativity. He uses this great analogy of a moving ship.
Right, walk us through that.
He says, look, if you're on a ship moving at a steady speed and you drop a stone from the top of the mast, where does it land?
At the foot of the mast.
Right. Not behind it. Why? Because the stone is part of the ship's system. It's moving with the ship. So he applies that to the Earth. The clouds, the winds, us, we aren't left behind because we're all moving together as part of one system. The motion is uniform, so you don't perceive it.
That is an incredibly sophisticated physical argument for the time. It just leads centuries ahead.
It's extraordinary. But we should be clear, he didn't just invent the infinite universe out of nothing. He was a synthesizer.
He was building on earlier thinkers.
Yes. Nicholas of Cusa, who Bruno called the divine Cusanus, had suggested an infinite universe back in the 1440s. And an Englishman, Thomas Digges, had also proposed stars in an infinite space. But the difference with Bruno was his uncompromising philosophical dedication to it. For him, infinity wasn't a possibility, it was the central theological principle.
And that's where the real danger was. His cosmology was the stage for his theology. And his theology was, in the year 1600, pure dynamite.
Precisely. His cosmology was the logical outcome of his deeper philosophical convictions, especially his Hermeticism, which gave this mystical, almost magical quality to his view of the universe.
So this brings us to the core charges, the heresies. What were the specific Catholic doctrines he was denying that basically guaranteed his execution, regardless of what he thought about planets?
The list is just It's a complete rejection of everything. It's comprehensive and aggressive. He denied eternal damnation. He denied the Trinity.
The idea of God is three persons.
He denied the deity of Christ. He denied the virginity of Mary. And he denied transubstantiation, the central miracle of the Mass.
So a wholesale rejection of the Church's authority and the very basis of its ritual power.
And there's more. The charges also included belief in metempsychosis, reincarnation, the idea that the human soul could be reborn into animals.
Which completely undermines the Church's control over the afterlife. If souls just recycle, hell loses its sting.
It loses its terror. And finally, the charges of dealing in magic and divination, a direct reference to his esoteric works, which claimed humans could harness cosmic power without needing a priest.
So if we tie this all together, the foundation for all this rebellion was his concept of God itself, his pantheism.
Yes. His view was that the concept of God is not separated from that of the universe. God is the universe, the world's soul, an immanent principle within everything.
And why was that not just a theological error, but a political threat?
Because it makes the Church irrelevant. If God is the infinite, boundless universe and is fully present in every rock, every star, every person, you don't need a pope. You don't need priests or sacraments to access the divine.
Every individual could just connect directly.
Through knowledge, which is what his art of memory was all about. It was a system for directly engaging with the world's soul. He was proposing a complete democratization of the divine, and that was the one thing the power structure of the 16th century could not tolerate.
So after decades of running, armed with these fundamentally explosive ideas, he finally gets trapped. Let's talk about that collision. How does it start in Venice?
It starts with that invitation and ends in betrayal. Giovanni Mocenigo invites him to be his tutor. And Bruno, maybe he got too comfortable, too trusting. He let slip too many of his core beliefs about infinite worlds and his anti-Trinitarian views.
And Mocenigo, for whatever reason, fear, frustration, genuine horror, he denounces Bruno to the Venetian Inquisition.
The denunciation in May 1592 is just damning. It's not just the infinite worlds, it's accusations of blasphemy, personal misconduct. Bruno gets arrested. He defends himself pretty skillfully at first, arguing his ideas were just philosophical speculation.
He knew Venice didn't like Rome, so he tried to use that political tension.
He did. But his notoriety was just too great. The second the Roman Inquisition hears that the Giordano Bruno is in custody in Italy, they demand his transfer.
And Venice, despite its history of resisting Rome, eventually gives in.
The list of heresies was just too long, too serious. In January 1593, he's transferred to Rome. He would spend the next 7 years in confinement, mostly in the Tower of Nola.
7 years. That is an incredibly long time. It suggests they were putting immense pressure on him.
They were. The trial was overseen by Cardinal Bellarmine, the same man who would later deal with Galileo. They spent years trying to get Bruno to recant 8 specific propositions, the core heresies we just talked about.
So they're offering him a way out, just to abandon the philosophical core of your system.
Exactly. And for years, Bruno tries to walk this impossible line. He tries to say he accepts church dogma, but wants to keep his cosmology as a philosophical hypothesis. But the Inquisition demanded total submission.
And in late 1599, the moment of truth arrives.
He refuses to budge. He gives this famous declaration that he did not wish to repent of having too little to repent, and in fact did not know what to repent.
Wow, that's a total rejection of their authority.
It was a declaration that his truth was superior to theirs. So Pope Clement VIII declares him a heretic, and he's handed over to be executed.
On February 17, 1600. And the details of the execution, they're just chillingly specific.
It was designed to completely erase him. Contemporary records say he was executed naked, with his tongue imprisoned because of his wicked words. That wooden vice, it was to make sure he couldn't utter one last heresy before the fire took him.
But even then, even at that moment, he got the last word in. Or at least the story goes that he did.
The famous quip. A witness reported that when he heard his sentence, Bruno told the judges, "Maiori forson cum timora sententiam in me fetis quam ego excipiam."
Perhaps you pronounce this sentence against me with greater fear than I receive it.
It's just a spectacular moment of defiance. He's telling them that they are more afraid of his ideas than he is of their fire. His death immediately transformed him from a philosopher into a symbol.
Which brings us right back to our central question. Was he a martyr for science?
That narrative became incredibly powerful, especially in the 19th century when science and religion were seen as being at war. People drew the obvious parallel with Galileo.
Galileo recanted and lived. Bruno refused and burned?
Exactly. His defense of a moving earth and innumerable worlds are always cited as the key reasons. It's a clean, powerful story.
But modern historians tend to see more nuance. The Church was willing to let people discuss a moving Earth as a hypothesis. So is that really the core issue?
Probably not the sole issue. Most scholars now stress that it was the whole interconnected package. His denial of dogma, his belief in reincarnation, his pantheism, his magic. These were the central charges.
The historian Francis Yates made the point that his cosmology and his heresies were quite inseparable.
And that's the key. His cosmology wasn't just an abstract scientific theory, it was the necessary physical container for his dangerous theology. He needed an infinite universe to house his infinite, immanent God.
The moment he says there's a plurality of worlds, he's directly challenging the unique central story of Christ's salvation.
It just destroys the whole framework. The cosmology was the visible part of the threat. The pantheism was the ideological engine driving it.
It's interesting how the Vatican handles this today. In 2000, Cardinal Sodano called his death a sad episode, but also defended the prosecutors, saying they did everything they could to save him.
But even the Vatican's own archive places his trial in the context of the relationship between science and faith at the dawning of the new astronomy. So even they acknowledge that his scientific views were a major factor. His death is this perfect, lethal collision of science, theology, and philosophy.
So despite the Church's attempt to literally silence and erase him, the vice, the fire, putting his works on the forbidden books list, his story and his ideas survived. He became this enduring icon.
A potent symbol for free thought and free speech. And this really came to a head after 1870 when the Church lost its political power over the city of Rome.
That's when the push began to build a monument to him in the Campo de Fiori, on the exact spot where he was executed.
It was a huge political battle. The clerical opposition was intense, but the monument was finally inaugurated in 1889, and it's an act of pure defiance.
The inscription is incredible.
It really is. It says, "To Bruno, from the age he divined here where the pyre burned." It's giving him his voice back in the very place they tried to take it away forever.
And his influence just spread. There's a statue of him in Berlin. And in literature, he was a huge influence on modernists like James Joyce.
Yes, especially in Finnegan's Wake. Joyce was fascinated by Bruno's idea of the coincidentia oppositorum, the coincidence of opposites.
What was that exactly?
For Bruno, in an infinite universe, all opposites ultimately reconcile. Light and dark, hot and cold, they coincide in the infinite. Joyce loved this idea of a fundamental unity underlying everything, and he wove it into the very fabric of his novel.
And of course, Bruno has made it into modern pop culture. The series Cosmos had a whole animated segment about him.
Right. And while that portrayal definitely simplifies things, it leans very hard on the martyr of science angle. It shows how powerful his legacy is. He represents the uncompromising search for knowledge, no matter the cost.
It seems only fitting, then, that the man who imagined an infinite cosmos would end up having his name written on it.
It's the most beautiful kind of recognition. There's the 22-kilometer impact crater on the far side of the moon named Giordano Bruno.
And there are 2 asteroids named for him as well.
That's right. Asteroid 5148 Giordano for the man himself, and 13223 Senesceneri, named for the Ash Wednesday Supper, the book where he laid out so many of these radical ideas.
Just amazing. His core concepts, exoplanets, an infinite universe, our solar system not being the center of anything, they eventually became central ideas in modern science. He was 500 years too early, but he was right.
So when you synthesize this whole story, you see his death wasn't simple. It was this tragic, inevitable nexus point. His scientific ideas were completely inseparable from his aggressive theological heresy. He stood at the edge of the Renaissance and demanded that humanity accept a chaotic, unbound, but infinitely promising universe.
And the lesson is about that enduring tension between intellectual freedom and institutional control. Bruno's God was the infinite universe itself, a concept of unbound possibility. And the powers of his day saw that possibility as a direct threat to their own necessity.
The only thing that could stop his mind from running around, as Abbott so crudely put it, was the vice and the stake. But the ideas, they survived the fire.
And that brings us to our final thought for you. We live in an age where we know the universe is vast, maybe infinite. We know exoplanets are out there by the thousands. But what limits are we putting on knowledge and belief today? What radical ideas are we instinctively dismissing just because they threaten our current comfortable understanding of the cosmos? Just like Bruno's infinity threatened the neat, finite world of 1600. His story is an eternal reminder of the price and the necessity of intellectual freedom.